Welcome to the Kanata North Ward All Candidates meeting. This meeting has been organized and sponsored by the following community associations: Kanata Beaverbrook, Briarbrook Morgan's Grant, Kanata Lakes, and Arcadia. I'm Chris Browell with the Kanata Lakes Community Association, and I'll be your moderator for this evening. I'd like to welcome the candidates for this evening: Ural Kopil, Kathy Curry, and Christine Moulaison. The goal of this evening is to provide you, the local voters, with an opportunity to see and hear the candidates and to understand who they are, what they bring to the table, and how they will serve Kanata North as potential city councillor. The format of the evening is that candidates will present opening remarks, and followed by their responses to questions and closing remarks. The questions have been compiled from emails from voters and questions submitted at the door. Each candidate will provide the response to each of the questions. The order that candidates speak will change on a rotating basis, so no one candidate is always speaking first or last. Time allowed for each candidate is 3 minutes for opening and closing remarks each, and 3 minutes for each candidate for each question. Candidates will be warned at the 30 seconds before the end of their time, and a stop at the end will be provided by our timekeeper. Thank you. With that, let's proceed with the debate and the opening statements. 3 minutes each. The first opening statement will be from Kathy Curry. Kathy.
Thank you very much, Chris, and thank you, Neil, for organizing this, and the Kanata Beaverbrook Community Association for making sure people knew about it. I'm really happy to be here. For those of you who don't know me, I am Kathy Curry. I'm your current city councillor, and I was appointed back in November. So I've been in the job for about a year. Jenna Suds was your former councillor, and she became your member of parliament for the federal government, and city council appointed me. So for the past year, there have been a lot of different events that I think would warrant someone to stay in the job and continue with. I'll name a couple, just that, you know, I think near and dear to most people's heart is our Kanata green space. And then on the other side of March Road, really our vision for the tech park that are up and running, the visions by various people who would like to see things continue or would like to see development stop. I think that I bring continuity. I believe that I have a background. I think that's your speaker on. However, I'll continue. I bring the education background, and I have a history as a teacher, and I
have Chris, you're making all sorts of racket on your microphone.
Thanks, Chris. I know we've had microphone challenges. So I have a number of university degrees, one of which I've almost completed, a Master's of Counseling Psychology, and a Master's in Education and a Bachelor of Arts of English Language Literature. I have an extensive governance background as your Ottawa Carleton District School Board Chair of the school board. I sit on the CHIO board. I was on the Ronald McDonald House board, the Caldwell Family Centre board, the Ottawa Community Foundation Grants Committee, and the Ontario Centre of Excellence for Children and Youth Mental Health. As your current city councillor, I sit on the Hydro Ottawa board, the Police Services board, Planning Committee, IT subcommittee, and the Finance and Economic Development Committee. So I think there is a lot of experience I bring. I have life experience. My kids, 4 of them, are young adults and are also people who would be concerned about this city as they all live here and would like to continue to live here and afford a house. So I think that I have a lot of experience. I think that I have the ability to do a good job. I think I've done a very good job for the past year, despite really challenging conditions. So I would look forward to continuing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Christine.
Hi. Good evening to all the residents joining us tonight. Thank you, Chris, for moderating tonight. and to Neil and the community associations for organizing this evening, which we all greatly appreciate as candidates. My name is Christine Moulazon, and I want to thank you all for allowing me to introduce myself to you and explain why I believe I'm the best candidate to be the next city councillor for Kanata North. I've been a resident of Kanata North, Brookside specifically, since 2008. My 4 kiddos, as like Kathy has 4, have lived in the ward their whole lives, and in my humble opinion, have been super fortunate to do so. We've all created lifelong relationships and friendships in the community, and we are so grateful that we've had that opportunity. So my journey to this point here began in September of 2014 when I joined my daughter's school council. I did not realize that it would sort of bring me to this point. And I was fortunate enough to be welcomed into that community and sort of learn more about the community as a whole in that role. In 2015, I volunteered to be our school's representative to the Ottawa Carleton Assembly of School Councils, or OCASC, as well as be the zone representative. I had a newborn at the time. I did not let that slow me down. He joined me everywhere I went, and he sort of became honorary members to all the committees that I joined. My dedication paid off for me. In 2016, I was elected the co-chair of my kiddo school council, as well as I became a liaison officer at OCASC and became their non-voting member at the OCDSB's Committee of the Whole, which gave me the chance to be the voice for parents and parent councils across the city, which is a phenomenal opportunity and a great honor. In 2018, I had the pleasure of being selected to make a presentation on behalf of OCASC to the Minister of Finance for the province of Ontario, and had only 5 days to prepare. That would intimidate many people in doing something like that, but I was very honored to do that and able to pull it together and create a presentation that seemed to strike some great chords and had him come back and actually speak to all the concerns that we brought to him, which I greatly appreciated. In 2019 and 2020, I had the opportunity to join some more committees, school year calendar committee, and once again, speaking for more parents and parent councils. Last year, I was fortunate enough to be elected to Vice President of the BMGCA, which was a huge honor that presented me with an opportunity to hear from the community as a whole and represent them citywide. I was able to represent the community association to the FCA as well as to the cafes meetings throughout the year. I was able to join with the community cleanup. I was able to also help host the community walk, which is our first in-person event that we've had since pre-COVID, which was a fantastic event, and we greatly appreciated that. So being part of the community association has been such a rewarding experience. And I hope that having all these experiences, joining these committees and going across the city and learning what people need and sitting on all these groups will help make me work harder as a representative for you guys at City Council. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christine. Bureau.
Hello, my name is Viorel Kopiel, and I am running for councillor in Kanata North. Like the vast majority of Canadians and their ancestors, I am an immigrant. I was born in Romania and immigrated to Canada in 2000. My education started in Romania, where I obtained a bachelor degree in business administration and continued in France with a master in business administration, only to be finalized in Canada, where I obtained a professional accounting certificate and the Chartered Professional Accountant CPA designation. Before starting work for the federal government in 2005, I worked in the private sector in finance and accounting. Through hard work, determination, and professionalism, I advanced from junior financial officer to the manager level in financial management. As Chief Financial Management Advisor for several years, I helped senior managers to spend their budget wisely while ensuring the transparency and the accountability of this process. Presently, I work as a project manager in the federal government, making sure that the project I am in charge of is delivered on scope, on time, and within approved budget. I am married and living in Morgan's Grant, where I've been raising my kids for the past 14 years. So as a resident of Kanata North for the past 15 years, I have witnessed a steady decrease in the value we receive for our taxes. We all can see examples that show that our city is poorly managed and also that our interests as ordinary citizens are not taken into consideration when city halls makes decisions. So instead of complaining about the things that are not done or that are done the wrong way, I have decided to get involved, to use my knowledge and experience in financial and project management to try to make a difference and to be your voice at the city hall. As your next councillor, I intend to work collaboratively with my fellow councillors and the mayor to ensure that Kanata North receives its fair share of funding while advancing our top priorities: improve public transit reliability, safety, and affordability, to keep our neighborhoods safe, clean, and green, to tighten fiscal responsibility, to improve management or oversight, and minimize tax increases, and to establish Kanata North as the business hub of Ottawa.
Thank you to the three candidates for the opening statements. We'll now proceed to the question segment, the question and answer segment of the debate. To remind the candidates, there are two components to the questions. After the issue that I discuss and state, they will be followed by two questions. What is your understanding of the issue? And how will you address the issue as Kanata North's councillor? So the first issue we'll discuss this evening is fiscal management and tax impact. The City of Ottawa is increasingly using 30-year bonds versus funds within the annual budget to finance capital projects. This figures prominently in the proposal of one mayoral candidate to fund primarily city core bike lanes with $250 million to be implemented in the next 4 years. Unfortunately, while we get immediate benefits, it increases debt, which limits future spending. The related financial issue is OC Transport. It budgeted for 82% of 2019 ridership by November 2022. Results, including August 2022, show that ridership is far below that target, projected to result in an $85 million shortfall. Additionally, LRT Phase 2 will come online by 2025, essentially servicing the same ridership. This suggests some tough financial choices in the coming years, potentially impacting the city's financial position, including the ability to borrow and property taxes. So to respond to this question first will be Kathy Curry. Kathy, what is your understanding of the issue and how will you address this issue as Kanata North Councillor? Kathy.
Chris, that's an excellent question. It's very well phrased and has many interesting components. So first of all, I think it might be helpful for listeners to understand that the city municipal governments have very few ways to gather revenue to bring in funds. One is property tax, one is user fees, and one is development charges. We also have the ability to get some interest on funds that we're not using. So those are the only ways that cities can bring in revenues. So if we then decide to spend more than we potentially bring in, and to your point about the transit estimation, 82% of ridership, and we potentially won't have that. I mean, councillors asked that question many times at Transit Commission and at budget. If it's off, then we will have some debt. That debt would add to the already existing debt we have, and we already have debt servicing challenges, which we have to deal with increased interest rates. Interest rates have continually gone up. We believe there may be one other increase. So for any candidate running for mayor right now to suggest that we would borrow more and then deal with that additional debt and or use reserves right now, I think is worrisome, because the other option to use existing reserves means that when we need reserves, and you look at some of the storms we've had recently and some of the challenges we've had, those reserves won't be there. So one of the things I think we have to do was in your question, Chris, and that is make some tough choices. And when I talk to people in Kanata, they want more services, and rightly so. They pay a lot of property tax right now. So I think what is likely going to have to happen is people are going to have to make some tough decisions during budget time. You see, one mayoral candidate is saying 0 increase in property taxes. I guess I would be concerned that maybe the first year we try 0, borrow, and then the next year, what would that be? 20%. So I think what's going to mean is we're going to have some tough choices. LRT stage 2 is not fully funded yet, and stage 3 we're hoping for federal and provincial. All of these are challenging times, including some of our union negotiations based on the cost of living increase at potentially 7.5%. So I think I have quite a lot of knowledge on this. I think what it results in is some interesting choices we may have to make.
Thank you, Kathy. Same question, Christine.
So there's a bunch of different pieces, like Kathy was saying, to this question. And one of them is going further into debt. And that is a huge concern, especially when we already know there are so many concerns with inflation. We already know that there are assessments being done. And there are concerns even from MPAC about how we can safely raise property taxes and stay within a certain amount and provide the same services that we always have, including LRT, including transit, and making sure that these pieces are there for people. And we're not talking just about that. We're talking about community services as well. We need to make sure that we can make those choices. And how do we make sure that our property taxes are going to the right areas? If we only have that much ridership, how much more is going into that piece, especially when we're seeing that those pieces aren't serving necessarily our ward? And we know that's a concern. And we know that people here feel like they aren't being served necessarily by some of those pieces in our ward. And that concerns me. So how do we make sure that not just in Ward 4, but citywide, that we're not going deeper into debt as a city? How do we make sure we're making those tough choices? How are we deciding which services we actually need to keep funding that will make sure that people are living those full lives they need to without increasing taxes too much? And saying that we're going to go to 0% for a year is not the best strategy. Let's be honest. We know that we're going to have to pay that back in the following year. What's that hit going to be? How bad is that going to be the following year? And we know that people are already struggling now. If we're putting people, we're taking that back and we're saying, okay, we're going to give you a break this year, but is that increase next year going to be so harsh that that is going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back? And that's what concerns me, especially when we're seeing the prices of housing and that sort of thing already in Kanata. We can't keep increasing these sorts of things while we still want to make sure that we're providing these services that are so vitally needed in Kanata North.
Thank you, Christine. Bureau.
Okay, so financial management is at the same time, it's an easy question because we are dealing with it every day at home. And at the same time, it's a complex question depending on the size of the organization we are looking at. So in addition to what it has been mentioned as a source of funding for the city, taxes, development fees, etc., city has access to other funding for other levels of the government when we have a big project in place, like we have LRT, and where the provincial and the federal government have invested money as well. On the other hand, they are requiring accountability and proper management of the funding provided. And we have the surprise that we still are waiting for a portion of the funding promised by both federal government and provincial government for phase 1 LRT, because they are not convinced that it was a proper management of the phase 1, which we have seen that it hasn't been done properly, though it's evident. Regarding the aspect of borrowing money, we borrow money in our own life. We borrow money, companies that are private owned borrow money. The question is not the aspect of borrowing money, is the question for what we are borrowing money. For this specific question that it has been raised, borrowing money for building something that is not a must to have, I don't think that it's a wise idea. So at an organization level, we have to make a decision between must to have and nice to have. And borrowing money for nice to have, it's not a wise idea. So I would not be in favor of borrowing 250 million for building bike lines that are nice to have, in my opinion, while we have other pressing needs at the City Hall, in Kanata North, and other wards in Ottawa. Regarding the transit question, the ridership that it's low, it's evident that in the past 2 years we have a reduced ridership because it was pandemic. On the other hand, if we want to increase the ridership, we have to increase the reliability of the transit, which is far from what it's expected. So if we want better results in that direction, we need to action now.
Thank you, Viral. The next theme, the next topic is community infrastructure maintenance. The city has been postponing or failing to do maintenance for years, which includes stormwater management systems, as was revealed in the Beaver Pond flooding in August of this year, pathways, and roads. Even routine street lighting issues, such as a row of dark overhead street lights on Beaverbrook Road, took weeks to resolve. This suggests that the city is routinely cutting services to meet commitments and not increasing property taxes. What is your understanding of the issue, and how will you address this issue as Kanata North's councillor? We will start this segment with Viora.
So I consider that infrastructure is an essential part of our community, but it's really not properly maintained. If the maintenance is not performed the right way at the right time, we not only benefit less from the investment, but also the cost to maintain it increases significantly. The growing population will put additional stress on the infrastructure, so it's vital that maintenance of the infrastructure be undertaken in a timely, cost-effective, and correct manner. This is not currently being done. So I consider that it should be started with a proper budgeting for these activities, but also it requires the city to verify the quality and the quantity of the work performed. It's not unusual to see a road resurface, and 2 years later, we have to do it again. I don't think that is the best use of our money. We have to do a proper maintenance at the proper time, at the right level.
Thank you. Next, Kathy Curry.
Thanks, Chris. This is a question near and dear to my heart. I get a lot of emails on this. I want to explain something first, in that a number of years ago, the provincial government that used to fund all of our road infrastructure cut all funding to municipalities all across Ontario. So municipalities had to find that money elsewhere. And those are significant costs. Just to give you a rough estimate, to rebuild March Road and widen it, 5 years ago, the estimate was $780 million. For a city to find $780 million is very difficult to do. So it's part of the reason why so many of our infrastructure projects are left, as your example, where we don't get to things. One of the things city staff have told me over and over again is, due to that significant change in funding, what we don't do as a city anywhere near as often as we used to do is proactively find projects to work on. So what we do is react. And you see that in all sectors. Healthcare, I just came from the CHIO board meeting. We were talking about that very issue, that so much of our funding and government issues are reactive instead of proactive. And that comes from a lack of funding. So I think that's potentially where that starts. And then we also have a really inefficient way of dealing with infrastructure. So if you think about it, all of our pipes and wires and everything are in the city right of way at the edge of roads. Imagine if we had a concrete block that was the top of it as a sidewalk, and inside of it was all the pipes and all the infrastructure you would ever need for that community, which you can only do in a new community. Then you would have not every single time them digging up, trying to find pipes and try to find wires and all the rest of it to redo it all and then rebuild a sidewalk and repave, which does not come out as well as it was originally built. You end up with an asphalt patching instead of real sidewalk. So, I mean, I think when we try to build new neighborhoods, that's when we can do new technologies and make things more efficient and effective. But for now, we continue to have this old way of repatching and repaving because there isn't that original money. One of the things I will say is there are technologies that help. For example, we have new pothole repair technology that has helped, but again, we're patching and repairing. But, as you will see in Beaverbrook, 50-year-old wires and sanitary sewers will have to be repaired, and that cost will have to take place regardless. And we go back to our budget comment where we'll have to make some tougher choices to get the infrastructure paid for.
Thank you, Kathy. Christine.
So I think the key issue, sort of like Kathy was mentioning, is we need to be proactive and not reactive as a city. We can't keep waiting until things are on the brink of failure, or as you're saying in Beaverbrook with lights, or we're saying with the stormwater drain in the Beaver Pond, we're at the point of failure. That's not okay. That's not acceptable. We're not paying tax dollars and the amount we are here in Kanata North so that we can have everyone react after we're already having issues. We need to make sure that we're looking at these things proactively. Let's have cycles. Let's have rotations. Let's do this through the city and through the wards. Let's make sure that we know, okay, when is this being done? When is that being done? Let's make sure we're cyclically doing things. Let's make sure too, when we're doing new infrastructure and we're building new pieces into other existing pieces, are we making sure that the infrastructure we're putting in is going to be sufficient going forward? How much are we ripping out and how much are we actually incapacitating people that are already there? When we're building new subdivisions like we are up March Road, like we are in KNL, like that's fantastic that we can put in those new technologies. But when we're building where we're already existing, how are we making sure that we're putting in infrastructure as much as we can ahead of time in these areas and not impacting people that are already there? That's what's required. We look at what went on March Road, like Kathy was mentioning too, and it took 2 years to do that. And while we know that it was needed, some of that could have been done when it was originally done, and we know it was ripped up again and again. And we're paying every time it's being ripped up. Why are we not proactively doing that ahead of time and proactively making sure that these pieces are done, as opposed to reacting later on and doing those things? And we need someone who will look at that, who will make sure that we're taking accountability for that and making sure that someone is sitting there that's going, okay, this is what we're going to need going forward. How do we plan? How do we budget for this? And how do we make sure we're not leaving people literally in the dark going forward?
Thank you to all three candidates for your responses to question 2. We'll now proceed to the third question that's related to official plan impact on Kanata North. The previous and new official plan calls for extensive intensification of new subdivisions, vacant and underused land in Kanata North, and potentially infill replacement of existing single-family homes and other residential properties with high-density multi-unit residences. It is not clear that the city has thought through the post-development impact in communities like Kanata North, nor that it will respect the character of its communities. For example, the city has already approved additional housing units, which include single-family homes, towns, row houses, and apartments that will result in an 83% increase in population in the next 5 to 15 years. The new official plan mandates even more intensification. However, there has been no evidence of planning by the city on physical and social infrastructure investment in Kanata North to cope with these increases. What is your understanding of this issue? And how will you address this issue as Kanata North's councillor? And we will begin with Christine.
Thank you so much, Chris. So this is one of the things that I think a lot of people are talking about, and one of the biggest concerns I'm hearing from people is sort of that lack of consultation, that lack of communication, and that lack of transparency that's going to residents. How these things are being plotted out, we're seeing these official plans roll out, we're seeing that this is already seems to be planned ahead of time, and people don't actually have the chance to provide feedback. People who are living in these areas that we're going to more intensify, who can tell you that these streets aren't wide enough. We don't have enough at these intersections. This is not going to be safe when we're adding these pieces. We're seeing townhomes in close to my area here, which is fantastic. We need the homes, but at the same time, they're coming out, all these townhomes, onto a 2-lane street with no stop signs in that area, no actual intersections, and we've got kiddos that are going to school. If we'd listened to feedback from people living in that area going ahead before we went into this actual building, we would have known what we needed going in. And I think that feedback loop is going to be super important going forward. We know we need more housing. We know we need the infrastructure. We know this is going to be important for our city, and we know it's going to be important for Kanata North. What is going to be even more important is that feedback loop from the public. Let's listen to the people living here. Let's hear what they have to say. Let's hear what they have to say about how this is going to be built in these areas. And let's take that and incorporate some of those pieces while we're doing this going forward. We know we're going to grow. We know we have to grow, but let's make sure that we're incorporating those concepts from the people already here before we do. And I think that will help everyone already here. And I think that will also help the people that are going to be moving here and the planners and developers going forward. That real-time, real-life feedback from people in Kanata North. That's going to be key.
Thank you, Christine. Bureau.
Okay, so definitely the official plan shows that some efforts have been put on it, but there are some very serious flaws. As a resident of Kanata North, I could see that the plan was prepared to accommodate the existing approvals or those in advanced stage of the approval, while it should have been the opposite. We prepare the plan first and start to build after. It talks about the new neighborhoods only and leaves out the question of how to improve the life of the resident in existing neighborhoods and to integrate the existing ones to the newly built. It assumes that all new residents will work and shop in the neighborhood, which is unrealistic. Before we add as many as 5,000 units in the area, we need a serious plan to build an infrastructure that accommodates the additional residents and the increase of the economic activity that we hope to attract in the area. It is unfortunate that the City Hall didn't perform proper due diligence when the decision was made to extend the route of LRT Phase 3 to Kanata South instead of the Kanata North. Such a move would bring significant economic benefits to the city, would ease the traffic, and significantly reduce the environmental impact of so many cars on the streets. Because of those flaws, I would support a recall of this plan and replace it with another one, more realistic, one that integrates the interests of all Kanata North and where the actions match the declarations. In developing this area, it is necessary that the residents' voices are heard and not only those of the developers.
Thank you. Kathy.
Thank you for that. The official plan that is still before the province to approve was voted by City Council on a vote of 23-1, I believe. At worst, it was 22-2. So it was highly accepted by all councillors around the city, not just in one area. There were extensive consultations in every area of the city, and I don't know that the other candidates on this call were at them. We have community design plan consultations that took place for all of the area at March Road, including what could be proposed for an extension of that urban boundary. And the community came out for over a year of different consultations more than a year for the official plan. And every single consultation we've held to meet some of the official plan proposals were public meetings that anyone could go to. So I don't remember seeing any of the candidates on this call at these meetings, but I would encourage you in the meantime and in the future to go back and either look at those videos or attend new ones. I will say that the official plans, the main tenets of it are 15-minute neighborhoods. That is more difficult to do in an existing neighborhood, but not as difficult to do in a future neighborhood. Multi-unit is absolutely critical. I would encourage anyone on this call or listening to go and read the book called Strong Towns, or at least watch the video on how you ensure that you have all of the things you need in a community, including the development, the community development and benefits, amenities, and have enough money from tax revenues and income that the city can take to afford all of those things. So there are, I think, extensive consultations to come on many other components of the official plan. But I would say that our tree canopy target that's in the official plan, 40%, is critical for neighborhoods. We're not there. We're at 29% currently, but it is also in the official plan. We also have targets in the official plan to make sure that we minimize car traffic. And we have the idea that we will extend urban boundaries so that we have new neighborhoods to come, so that there will be enough housing in every neighborhood for people to afford. So the other thing I will say is that the high density targets and intensification are to be as close, 900 meters, to transit. So what we're seeing in Kanata is that exactly. And if you look at developments, and we could talk specifically, but I only have 3 minutes. Weeping Willow was a building that was always intended to be built. Bill Tarrant designed it to be there. 100 Stacy was not. And it was designed to be a business or an industry or something that would make sense in that industrial strip. And that zoning stayed in place because city councilors decided that that was the smartest thing to do. So all of these conversations took place during the official plan with extensive consultation, and the official plan has been lauded by many other cities when they look at what we have done. So I agree with almost everything in the official plan, and I'll see when the province approves it or not if they have any additional changes. But I must say that the extensive consultation and feedback, including park chats that I have held and open forums for anyone to come and listen to and participate in, and emails back for every single consultation you attend with your comments, are all taking place and have for many, many years.
Thank you to the candidates for your responses. We'll proceed to topic number 4, which is green space and trees. The provincial mandate for intensification has rolled out across Ottawa since 2013. Unfortunately, for many communities, this has been at the expense of trees and green space. In Kanata North, in addition to the threat of redevelopment of the Kanata Golf Course and Trillium Woods, other developments have already been impacted. The KNL lands and property south of Campo have been scraped to bare rock, destroying numerous strands of trees, which means green space and tree canopies on those properties will be decades after development completion. In addition, Kanata North trees on city right-of-ways in parks and other city properties have been aging out of storm damage, cut down, and if replaced, are largely achieved with spindly saplings, which frequently don't survive. What is your understanding of this issue, and how will you address this issue as Kanata North's councillor? We'll begin with Kathy Curry. Kathy.
Thanks, Chris. Well, the golf course issue has been ongoing forever, it seems, and we have many different angles to approach that on as we go forward, including with the 192 conditions that the Ontario Land Tribunal set out, NCC approval and Mississippi Valley Conservation Authority approval. Both of those approvals will be highly environmental in scope and will address some of the things that were not addressed when the KNL lands were sold off and then trees were allowed to be clear cut. At that time, a full environmental assessment was not done, and that will never happen again. Unfortunately, that has happened, and what we're seeing now is an inability for stormwater to be diverted anywhere, so all the trees were cut down potentially for nothing. The two areas of Kanata Avenue where trees are being cut down, I hope people understand that when builders cut down trees like that, they have to replace them based on our tree replacement bylaw, and either on site or in another area of the city. All that to say, the tree canopy target that I mentioned earlier of 40%, we are not at that. We are at 29, and I would encourage people to look at the motion that Deputy Mayor Dudas and I put forward to make sure that trees, even on private lands that were damaged in the storm, could be replaced. Absolutely, Chris, a mature tree, a little sapling being planted is nothing like a mature tree. But in some cases where a storm has damaged it, we have to do something. And we'd like to see homeowners be able to plant a new tree and not have to pay to do that, because it is the city's goal, and I'm sure everyone's goal, that we have additional trees. So my understanding on that is quite extensive. You're right about the rock and the challenges we have in Kanata especially, but I will say that I want people to understand that the original agreement for that golf course was Campo saying there's 100% of the land right here. We will take 60% of it and build Kanata Lakes, and we'll take the best land to do so. The 40% left over was basically the rockiest and what they consider to be not good quality land. And that became the golf course and green space, which people enjoy all over Kanata North, Kanata South. It's unbelievable how many people enjoy that for the 6 months of the year that it is like a public park. So the point of the matter is it's not a great place to build. And the developers who want to do that, I think, are going to realize that more and more when they start to address the 192 conditions, because 190 of them address those conditions: the rock, potentially the contamination in the rock from the golf course, and the inability for stormwater to be diverted. So there's a lot to talk about on that topic, but know that all of it is interrelated and will be addressed with environmental reviews that I hope really the province will help us with as well, if MPP Fullerton is able to get us an environmental review of the lands on the golf course.
Thank you, Kathy. Christine.
Thank you. Yeah. Keeping our green space as much as we have right now in Kanata is imperative. We know how vital having green space is. We know how vital our tree canopy is. We know how important it is for public health. We know how important it is to have in the environment, and we know how important it is as a city. And we're seeing areas, like you said, that are being bulldozed right to the rock, which for many of us is heartbreaking to see. And we're seeing some of our older trees that we know are creating this canopy being damaged more and more of these storms that are coming, which again is devastating to see. Like Kathy said, it's not ideal to have saplings come in and replace some of these trees, but let's start there. Let's start with doing that. We also talked about, you know, that we see environmentally what areas will and won't work. And we know that the golf course is not ideal for building. We're hoping that will help us. We know now that we're seeing, as we're bulldozing, the stormwater issues that we're having through Trillium Woods, through KNL, through the Beaver Pond, that we can't keep doing this. We can't keep raising through our city, and not just here. We're talking citywide. This isn't just in Kanata North, and we need to build this up. We need to work and create a better system for this. And we also need to work, like she was saying too, with the province, and let's make sure we're doing these assessments. Let's do this before we're creating these new areas, and let's make sure that we don't sort of defer back to, yeah, okay, this is what was planned, let's just go with it, and keep moving forward and go, no, you know what, let's take a pause for a second. Let's make sure we're doing the proper assessments going forward. Let's make sure that we're not ruining these areas, not just for us right now, but for our kiddos in the years coming forward. And let's make sure we're taking steps to ensure that we're making progress and keeping that canopy, and we're building on that 29% that we already have. Let's get to that 40% as soon as we can. We need that as a city. We need that as a ward. And there's so much more we can do on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Bureau.
Okay, so it's evident that the green space provides a lot of benefits to our health, climate, and the aesthetic of our city. The proposed city official plan to target a tree canopy of 40% is far to be achieved if we continue at the same rate as in the past years. So we have to take into consideration that the reality of Ottawa with the downtown, where we have a very high building density, it makes it much more difficult to achieve if we don't increase the density in suburbs like Kanata North. So it's unfortunate that we hear often that it happened in the past. So we need to approach this in a more proactive way. Think before allowing new developments, look at all the aspects, all the benefits, and also to address the potential downfalls of new developments and take proactive measures. We are all in favor of developments, of new developments, because we know that we need them in order to address the housing issues and to attract new businesses in the area. But we have to make every effort to ensure harmonious balance between new development, existing residential neighborhoods, and the environment. Regarding the golf link courses, we have to continue to fight this issue in the courts, because it's not just a question of environment, it also it's a base of our contractual relationship. So we need to continue the fight in the courts and work with the provincial government to look at potential stoppage due to environmental issues that we have all noticed. So we need to fight for our green space. We need to develop, but we have to do it in an harmonious way.
Thank you, Viral. We're slightly over halfway through our session. I thank all the candidates for your responses to this point. We'll now proceed to our fifth topic, transportation and traffic. Traffic congestion has been steadily increasing, with near gridlock along much of March Road and heavy traffic along Campo, Terry Fox Extension, Carling, Second Line, and March Valley Road. Yet, even with already planned 83% increase in population, Kanata North has not been on the existing Transportation Master Plan, or TMP, nor will it meet priority criteria in the new Transportation Master Plan or any new roads or transit until past 2035. And that only includes LRT3 and the proposed March Road BRT, neither of which would help in community transportation issues or transit, and for which funding is not assured. What is your standing of the issue, and how will you address this issue as Kanata North's councillor? Bureau, to you.
So transportation is a key factor in the development of an area. Kanata North is home to many companies that contribute a significant amount of money, not only to the federal and provincial budget, but also to the local budget. Study after study has shown that the lack of adequate transportation and the traffic congestion on streets impact negatively the development of our business area, many companies delaying or renouncing to move here. I would advocate that the route for the LRT Phase 3 to be reviewed. Also, that the traffic between the new residential area to the business area not to be directed through the residential areas that were not designed for such a use, but have dedicated lines that avoids residential areas. Lastly, but not the least, we need to fix the transit system. It takes forever to move between 2 points within the city. The buses do not respect the schedule, and the LRT is still not safe. We have been told that city needs more data and time to solve these issues. I don't think that we could wait any longer. I would propose to shorten the routes, assign enough buses, drivers to cover them, and create reasonable routes that link different parts of the city, not only the downtown. We need also to identify those responsible for the debacle of the LRT Phase 1 implementation and hold them accountable. Learn from this experience and apply those lessons learned to the Phase 2. Review the Phase 3 to ensure that it aligns to the city development plan, the costs are realistic, and the proper funding is secure. And as I mentioned for the official plan, we need to match our statements with the facts and actions on the field. The BRT proposed along March Road and the other major routes that are mentioned in the city do not solve the issues of the transportation, the traffic. So also it doesn't solve the problem that the companies, the big companies that we have in Kanata are facing with the traffic. So we need to match our words with actions.
Thank you, Viral. Over to you, Kathy.
Thank you, Chris. A number of things to say here. I do want to focus on Carling because if March Road is not going to be really widened and bus rapid transit up the center till 2035 or further, even though that is in the transportation master plan, there is also Carling. And so when Moody Drive Station opens, the option to put express buses up Carling is a significant help to get people to the tech park and beyond. But the fundamental problem that I hear about most often is internal buses to Kanata to get some of the cars off the road, because people in Kanata tend to drive because buses haven't been available. And I hope people understand that buses were taken off the road for LRT, and then even more were taken off during COVID. So there is an interest in which ones do we put back on. And in fact, while that data is being collected, and I know it takes time, as Viral said, it's frustrating to just keep waiting for data, but it does take time to know which buses to put back on, because people also don't want to see empty buses driving around, given the cost of gas and the cost to the city for empty buses to be driven. So there is a concept that we're talking about now with OC Transpo about busing on demand, which, believe it or not, and maybe Chris, you'll remember this, actually did take place in Beaverbrook in the 1970s. There was busing on demand. It actually took place in other parts of the city. So it's not a new pipe dream. It's something that can take place. So it would mean smaller buses. I mean, we have electric buses. The other option I think people have heard about is to have unmanned shuttles that would go from potentially Eagleson until we have LRT stage 3 into the tech park. But the widening of March Road is a significant project. And to your point about Campo was designed to be a complete street, widened, hence the reason why there's so much land on either side of Campo. That was a vision and potentially needed to be done many years ago. We have challenges with traffic with kids being driven to school now instead of being walked to school. I've talked to a number of principals, and they've come up with ideas on how to make kids walk further, at least have parents drop them off much further away from the school. So there are smaller strategies like that principals, parents, and students can look into to have at least the morning and afternoon traffic reduced. But we absolutely have to advocate and engage Ottawa, as we have at the Ottawa City of Ottawa site, is the way to give your input into the transportation master plan now and into the future. But I have committed to a number of people that after we gather the data from the tech park, from the universities and colleges, from the federal government as to who's going back and for what percentages, we absolutely want to hear from people who live in Kanata that are saying, my student cannot get to an after school job unless I drive them, because they can't get from Morgan's Grant to Centrum to work at Three Brewers. So those are the buses that we need to understand better which buses we want to put back on. And I think that can be done relatively easily in a survey, but the larger transportation and traffic problems are ones that will take significant funding, including potentially widening Carling Avenue as well. And that's a conversation that the councillor from that area and I have already had. And there is a theory that once you widen roads, it just encourages people to drive. But when we have our special economic zone that is designated in our official plan now, which let's hope the province approves that is a draw and a sort of a rationale for why we may need Carling widened and that train bridge fixed over there. So lots of projects, but again, budgets will need to be closely analyzed to make sure we can afford to do all that we need to do for Kanata and our special economic zone and the people of Kanata.
Thank you, Kathy. Christine.
Yeah, so there's a lot of pieces to touch on here. And one of the big ones when we're talking transportation and transit is when we are talking about these buses, because we don't have access to them, and we don't have the ones that can get people to school, and we don't have the ones that can get people to work, and we don't have the ones that can get people even from where I am in Brookside to, as Kathy said, to Centrum very quickly for those after school jobs, and for the record, to anywhere just for work or a university, then we are driving more. And that's why we are on the roads. And that's why we do need more infrastructure. We need to work on widening our roads. We do need to look at widening Carling. Maybe we do need to look at widening Campo sooner than we're planning, and looking at widening Terry Fox. We know that March is going to be coming later down the line. We know that the bus route will be going through there, which will be great, but that's not until 2035. That's an issue. We need to look at how we can get people to where they need to go now. We need to make sure that people can get to work now. We need to make sure that people can get to school now. And we're not doing that. And as much as we're waiting for data and we're waiting for it to come along, and that's great, it's taking a long time. And I know COVID sort of interrupted that. And I know we were looking at it beforehand, but we're coming back now. And we've been doing this now for over a year. And we still don't have a busing system, and we still don't have the roads that can handle it. And we see these people coming back to work. We see wanting to build these communities. We see wanting to build these new subdivisions. We do not have the capacity to hold it. And it's not fair to the residents that already live here to be on these roads that cannot hold what we have now, and then adding that many more people. We need to work. We need to work together. We need to widen the roads we've got now. We need to make sure that we've got buses that can get people where they need to go. And we need to work with OC Transpo to do that. And LRT and these autonomous vehicles, that's great. That's not going to be for a while. And saying that we're going to have this idea, it's going to be years in the making. People need to get to where they want to go now. And we need to work to build that infrastructure now.
Thank you all. We'll now proceed to our sixth question, meeting environment regulation changes, such as electrical, garbage, and other sources. Several coming environmental regulations will financially impact city infrastructure and residents. Examples of these include proposal that after 2030, homes and other buildings will be required to use electrified heating and cooling. It's been suggested that eventually this will impact existing homes. This also has significant implications for Ottawa and Ontario Hydro. Another example is proposed solid waste management changes that have been priced as high as $300 per year in property taxes. What is your understanding of this issue, and how will you address this issue as Kanata North's councillor? And we begin with Christine.
So implementing some of these things like electric heating and cooling into the new areas, I'm all for. We can absolutely do that. Let's make sure that we're doing that we're moving forward, that we're progressing in that direction, and we're not as reliant moving forward on fossil fuels. That's definitely a necessity, and we know we need to do that. We also need to work on how we can retrofit houses and how we can work to maybe subsidize that. Let's work together for people who are willing to do that already. Implementing that and pushing people to do it, I don't think is necessarily going to be the way to go. Pushing people forward and pushing people in that direction doesn't always make people as receptive. Let's see how we can work together. Let's see if we can work with the province to sort of bring this together and move forward together as a city and as a community and as a ward to do that. How can we also work with the new communities that are going to be built, the new businesses that are going to be drawn in? How can we work together with them to move together as a ward? How can we use them to also progress further, especially when we're looking at some of these new 15-minute communities? How can we use those and restructure some of that area? Can we bring in some of that electricity from there as well? And we're looking at some of the areas going forward too, where we're looking at wind turbines, even somewhere, some areas of the city too, going forward. But looking at doing that for new buildings, new houses going forward, I think is a fantastic idea. And looking at slowly over time retrofitting, I think is a better way to go forward, as opposed to just forcing it on people. I don't think we can do that.
Thank you, Christine. You're all.
Okay, so the current city council has declared in 2019 the climate change an emergency and adopted a plan to reduce the emission of greenhouse gas from the community by 43% by 2025. That means in 3 years from now, and by 100% by 2050. Based on the studies done, 45% of the greenhouse gas is emitted by the buildings and 44% by the transportation. To translate the official plan in words that we, the ordinary people, understand, to meet the city's target, it means that every household needs to reduce the energy used to heat their home by 70% by 2040. Personally, I would like to see the mayor and those who voted for this utopia reduce their heating in the winter and the air conditioning in the summer by 70%. The suggestion to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions from transportation are utopian as well for an ordinary person. Now, 3 years later, despite the significant reduction in the economic activity due to COVID-19, as it happens with any utopia, Ottawa is very far from achieving any of its targets. If voted to the council, I will advocate for scrapping this utopian plan and prepare a realistic and achievable plan that is within our financial means. Also, a very good way to reduce the greenhouse gas emission is to use more public transportation. But in order to convince our residents to do it, we need to make the public transportation system reliable and safe, which is not. As with any new ideas, as with everything that we need to build, we need more money, but we have to be careful where we spend the money, because money do not grow in the trees. And it's our money, and city council has to spend it wisely.
Thank you, Ural. And Kathy.
Thanks. A lot of the conversation around this started with the passing of the green standard in Toronto for builders, so that their new buildings had high performance development standards, and Ottawa, where we were very late in adopting some of these standards, looked at implementing them and asking builders to build to these high performance development standards, with the thinking that it saves money in the long run and it reduces energy costs. And that is one of the elements required to meet some of our climate emergency goals. Unfortunately, one of the challenges we have is that when we add in other things for builders to pay for, like inclusionary zoning and community development charges, it makes buildings more expensive. So, I mean, that's a sort of a side to this issue, but I sit on the Hydro Ottawa board, and one of the things that our CEO at Hydro Ottawa will tell us is that they have a number of excellent suggestions for the city. And one of them has already paid off, and that changing all of the street lights to the right types of bulbs saved the city significant dollars, which the city could then use to do other climate initiatives. So I think that is only one of the initiatives that Hydro Ottawa has already to work with the city to make sure that we can improve our use of energy as a city. We can reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. And I look forward to the next term of council where Hydro Ottawa can take more of a leading role in suggestions to the city. I will say that part of our energy goals is also has to do with, everything is so interconnected, has to do with some of our high density near transit goals, so that if we have fewer gas emissions, then we have come closer to meeting our goals potentially for our climate initiatives. But as to the question about having individual homeowners build to those standards, in new construction for sure, where we would have heat pumps instead of gas furnaces and oil furnaces, absolutely. For homeowners, existing homeowners, what we have as a city is we have a number of initiatives, one of which is a significant fund that city councilors voted to renew so that homeowners can make their homes more energy efficient. And let me tell you, the demand is high because homeowners realize that when you do that, you save significant dollars in your heating costs and cooling costs. So that I'm sure will be something that is renewed, not to immediately say to homeowners, you have to change over your furnace, but here's an initiative that may help you to do that. And let's give you some funds to go ahead and do that. So I don't see this being a wholesale change, but I see it being a gradual change. And people want to do these types of things anyways, as they often get energy assessments for their entire houses to see where can they save money. And I tell you, it is fascinating to be on the Hydro Ottawa board to see that as we all start to drive more and more electric vehicles, the challenges with our grid and our ability to actually power all these electric vehicles, including electric buses, is something that we have to address. And we know that in California, with only 3% of the cars being electric, the grid went down. So I think we have a number of private and public entities that need to come together to meet some of our climate goals, but they are critical, just maybe not something we can do overnight.
Thank you to all candidates for the question. We are now proceeding to our seventh and final topic, which is climate events. Eastern Ontario has seen increasingly frequent and severe storms and flooding, which has not directly affected Kanata North. However, while the city has a well-organized emergency response team, it has not responded with upgraded plans for post-emergency cleanup and restoration. Nor are there known projects to mitigate the impact of future climate events, including upgrading Ottawa Hydro's distribution network, flood mitigation, or upgrading stormwater management facilities. What is your understanding of this issue, and how will you address this issue as Kanata North's Council? We start with Kathy Curry.
So flooding, whether it's the Ottawa River or whether it's the Beaver Pond into homes, or whether it's Shirley's Brook due to beaver dams that are bringing water closer and closer to homes, these are all challenges that cities must address. And one of the issues we've looked into with Barbara Ramsey and the Kanata Green Space Protection Coalition, Barbara and I have asked some pretty, I think, intelligent questions on stormwater calculations. Because to explain, when engineers design something and they stamp their approval of it, of the design, and say, you know, this will withstand the test of a 100-year storm plus 20%, say, those numbers that they are basing their projections on and their approval on for building are 20 years old. So one of the questions Barbara and I have asked many different people, experts at the city, is what would it take to change those projections? And the answers we've received back have been, well, our projections now, to my earlier point, are 100-year storm plus 20%. But 100-year storms are not what we're seeing now potentially. So the projections are worrisome. And as we decide to build more and more, and even think about building on a lot of our green spaces, in among other houses, flooding is a real issue. And to the point, cities have increased costs when we have these unique weather events. That storm cost the city in excess of $30 million. And so we have a premier who said, oh, well, I'll definitely pay, and said publicly during the election period for the provincial election that I will contribute to those costs. We're now thinking that might not actually happen. Uxbridge is getting that funding, and potentially Ottawa will not. So it is absolutely essential that we make sure we are prepared. And, you know, as our CEO of Hydro Ottawa will say, I don't know that anybody can be prepared for hydro poles that would withstand 192-mile-an-hour winds. or kilometer-an-hour winds regardless. That's not something that our hydro poles can withstand. A lot of people have talked about maybe we put underground wires. That is also very expensive. But to my earlier point, in new neighborhoods, maybe we put them underground with the sidewalk on top in a contained box that is concrete and hopefully environmentally friendly concrete. And we look at ways that we can be better prepared for these unique weather events. But federal funding, provincial funding are often what we look to, as it's very difficult when, to my earlier point, when we have the province saying they'll no longer fund road infrastructure, it's very difficult for cities to fund a lot of these things. But it is pre-planning and something that, again, when we have budget, we'll have to talk about. It's not about meeting goals necessarily, but it's being prepared.
Thank you, Kathy. We move on to Christine.
Sorry, the button wasn't working there for a second. Yeah, so going forward, especially in something like this, we're seeing these storms happen more and more often. We're seeing this damage occur more and more often. And I think going forward, preparedness is going to be the main goal that we have to go forward with. One of the things Kathy mentioned, which is 100% accurate, is we can't have hydro poles through our city that can withstand these winds and withstand these storms. It's not necessarily possible. Going forward into new developments, yes, we can put them underground. That's great. However, let's make sure in areas where we don't have that ability, how can we better prepare our residents? How can we make sure that they know the pieces that they need at home, and how can they be better prepared? We're not talking just generators. We're talking about, can we make sure that we have people who know that when they've got medications, what they need for their medications? Can they make sure that they're refrigerated when they need to be? Can we make sure that we have areas where we make sure people know when they're going to need ice? Do we need power banks? Do we have them pre-charged? Are we making sure that people know these things and these pieces ahead of time? That is important. Do we make sure that we have sort of systems in place so that residents know how to prepare for these things ahead of time? This is going to be key. Knowledge is power for residents. Let's make sure that they have knowledge going forward and what they can do. Another key piece is making sure that we are working with the provincial government and the federal government. We know in this case, they seem to be backing out. We need to, as a city and as a council, hold them accountable for that. Let's make sure that there's other cities that have been getting funding, that have been supported through some of these storms. Why aren't we? Why aren't we holding them accountable for that? Why aren't we making sure that we're getting the funds that we should be entitled to? It's not necessarily, it shouldn't just be on the shoulders of our city. To do that, it should be, a group effort, so to speak. We should all work together in these sorts of areas. And we're seeing these storms happen more and more. We need to be more progressive when we're looking at new subdivisions. We need to be more progressive when we're looking at new infrastructure. We need to make sure that we aren't overwhelming the systems that we already have in place. We need to make sure that these plans are in place, that we aren't overwhelming our stormwater systems. We aren't going to see more flooding like we're seeing in the Beaver Pond. We aren't seeing more flooding like we're going to on the Ottawa River creep up more and further into Kanata North. We need to make sure that these systems are put in place ahead of time and that these are checked. The T's are crossed, the I's are dotted ahead of time. Let's protect our residents ahead of time. Let's make sure that we're planning ahead of time. Let's make sure that they're prepared and they know ahead of time of how to prepare themselves. And let's make sure that we're working ahead of time with the province and the federal government so that when we have these storms, we're already lined up and we can make sure that we can work together to better come and work together and fix the city up when we need to.
Thank you. Bureau.
We have witnessed in the last year several severe climate events, ice storms, flooding, tornadoes that resulted in loss of lives, significant property damages, and major disturbances to our way of life. While the City Council cannot prevent those disasters to happen or even predict them, it could do a better job in preparing the city authorities to manage the risk related to such events. like have protocols in place that clarifies the role and the responsibilities of local, provincial, and federal authorities, having plans ready to implement in case of emergency, and communicate them to the population at large. Of course, in the case of such events, ourselves, we could help our impacted neighbors, like offering shelter, helping with the cleanup, or even giving those involved in such activities a hot meal. I am proud to say that Ottawa residents have proved ourselves good neighbors when the need arose. We need to make our neighborhoods stronger, not destroying them by development that doesn't ensure a harmonious balance between new development, existing residential neighborhood, and environment. So we can do better in the planning and making our communities stronger. So that is within our power and better collaboration with other levels of government.
Thank you, Viral, and thank you to all the candidates. That concludes our question and answer segment. Thank you all for sharing your comprehension of these complex issues and your vision to address them. We will now proceed to our final segment, which are closing statements. You have 3 minutes each, as with the previous responses, and the opening statement. We will begin with Vioral Kopil. Vioral.
Okay, I have realized that running for a public office requires a lot of effort and energy. No matter the results of the vote, I would like to thank you, Kathy and Christine, for your decision to run for the councillor position to represent Kanata North. We have heard from many that this election will define the future of our city for many years to come. Our right to vote means nothing if we decide not to use it. So please exercise your right and vote. We have an opportunity, if not an obligation, to elect the city council that has the competencies to do the work that is required and that shares the priorities of the people it represents. I believe that with my qualification and experience in financial project management, council will pay attention to what I have to say, and this will enable me to represent you very effectively as your councillor.
Thank you, Viral. Kathy Curry.
Thank you, and thank you for your kind words, Viral. I've been your counselor for the past 11 months, 10, 11 months, whatever it is. And I certainly would like to continue. It's a very big job, and I'm definitely up for it. I would like people to really understand that when people ask me, Kathy, what are your priorities? I truly mean it when I say it doesn't really matter what my priorities are, because I know what it means to represent other people and their priorities. And I will say that Kanata North, the priorities are almost homogeneous. People want green space. They want our tech park to thrive. They want to make sure their neighborhoods are walkable, that there are pathways, that the infrastructure is taken care of, that their boulevards are cut, that there's transportation to get their kids to where they need to go and to get themselves downtown in something less than an hour and 40 or 50 minutes. I hear the same things at the doors, and I want you to know that nobody goes into office and makes promises and just immediately gets them to come to fruition. They make promises and they try very hard. And if nothing else, I'm a person who tries very hard. I listen, I talk to residents, and I make sure that what I bring forward at council is not something that Kathy Curry has some great idea about, but that I have heard from people in the community. And those people are often either the individuals I meet at park chats, people I meet on the street, and the community association members, for which meetings I attend every month, and the community association presidents, whose job it is, and they do it well, to represent their individual communities, because they too understand what it is to represent other people. I certainly have done it in the past as your chair of the Ottawa Carleton District School Board. I certainly do it on all the boards I serve, and I'm excited and highly interested in doing it again for another 4 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kathy Curry. And Christine Moulezon.
So thank you again so much for hosting this, and thank you, Chris, for being the moderator this evening. Like Vioral said, this is not an easy thing to take on. So to Vioral and Kathy as well, for throwing your hats in the ring, congratulations, and thank you for joining on this run. I hope that for everyone who's watching, I've sort of shown my passion for the ward, my passion for the city, and how much I look forward to being a voice for everyone. Sitting on the other committees that I've sat on before, sitting on OCASC, sitting on parent councils, sitting at the BMGCA, I've had the opportunity to be that voice, to step out and step up and speak out and make sure that people are heard. And I can do that for Kanata North, and I would absolutely love the opportunity to do that. As someone who lives in the ward and has since 2008, I feel that I can greatly represent everyone who's here. I look forward to hearing from everyone. I look forward to getting that communication, that feedback, getting that consultation back going, and making sure that your voice as a community is the one that's heard. It's not me that's sitting in that chair representing myself. It would be me sitting in that chair representing everyone within Ward 4 and everyone within the city. And I look forward so much to that opportunity. And again, thank you so much for this evening. And I can't wait for election day. Please get out. Please vote. Your vote and your voice matters. Please get out there, X those ballots, and have your voice heard. Your vote counts and matters. Have it heard. Get out there on October 24th, if not before early voting. Have a great evening, and thank you again.
Thank you to all our candidates for joining us this evening, and once again for sharing your comprehension and your vision on these very complex issues. And we look forward to the vote upcoming on October 24th. We'd like to thank each of you, Kathy Curry, Viral Kopel, and Christine Moulaison, and also our trusty timekeeper, Neil Thompson. I'm Chris Browell from the Kanata Lakes Community Association. I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening, those who could, and the session will also be recorded and posted on YouTube. Thank you very much and have a wonderful evening. Good night.